Hey everyone, Synthetic Future here. So today I want to do a little more exploration of the Soundtoys EffectRack. I showed it in a demo yesterday with my D-50, which once again is here in front of me. And we will be using it again to demonstrate some functionality of the Soundtoys EffectRack. I didn't go into explaining what EffectRack is, so I do want to shortly breeze over what it is. So EffectRack is essentially all the plugins by Soundtoys combined into one single unit. So let me get the D50 out of the way. So it's the essential 14 effects. I would even argue it's all of their effects, aside from their reverb unit, which is only sold separately. It also doesn't include all the standalone units, VSTs, but it does include all the full versions of all their software effects. So there's a difference of 7 effects, which are the little ones and the reverb. Now, personally, I don't really care a lot about that. The most important part is having the full effects to your disposal. And you can actually just use one effect if you want to by simply loading up the plugin. And you can actually slam it into the smaller mode, the auto scaling mode, which I have now. And if you only have one plugin, it will just look like this, which to me is totally acceptable. I don't need a separate plugin. I can just use this, throw in whatever effect I need, and that works just fine as separate VSTs. And I did a little testing. It doesn't seem like EffectRack actually adds a lot of CPU load. So you shouldn't really notice a difference between using this or the standalone VSTs. Yes, it is slightly more work to load it in this way, but I mean, if you look at the price difference between the EffectRack and their full bundle, it's pretty substantial. So right now it's on sale at $2.99 normally, $1.99 on the sales price. If you were to buy the full bundle, it's right here. So that's $4.99 or $2.99 right now. So that's a very significant difference for just the reverb and having the smaller standalone versions of the different effects. So for me, I would say this isn't an interesting offer. The EffectRack, however, is. So let's bring back the D50. There we go. And let's just run some sounds through it. So let's start off with our iconic D50 sound, which is of course Fantasia. Which is a beautiful sound, really. Quite timeless. Let me make sure I can actually see my own level monitoring. That's nice to have. There we go, that's Fantasia. Now let's turn on the EffectRack, which is kind of hard to do, actually. I hope the neighbors saw isn't all that audible. Just going to have to YOLO it. So what we have here is one of the racks. Now, what I sort of dislike is that it scrolls really freaking slow. Even though in other screens it scrolls really fast, here it's a very slow scroll speed, which is a little bit annoying when you start racking up the effects. But okay, that's beside the point right now. Let's just open an empty rack. So this is essentially doing absolutely nothing. And now you can add different effects that they offer in this rack. So let's start off with the crystallizer. This is actually based off an EVENTIDE module, I think. So this is like a granular echo synthesizer, they call it. It's a delay effect, which also does reversing and pitch alteration, so it's really cool. So if you turn off the reverse, it's basically just a delay. If you throw it into reverse, sounds really cool. That's the entirely wet effect, so that's the reverse you are adding to it. You can change the delay time. One fun thing is you can recycle the signal back into your chain. And you can also edit even more options with these little tweak things which fall out to give you some extra options to play around with. So low cut, high pass, attack and release for the filters. There's a ducking mode apparently. This is actually quite you can also pitch shift. Actually, automating this would be pretty interesting. So yeah, that's Crystallizer. You can override effects by just dragging them over top, so the previous effect becomes yellow and it will be deleted. Oh, there we go. Now Decapitator, let me just drive down a little bit, is basically like a bit crushing sort of ordeal. Oh, there we go. Let me actually see if I can find my lead sound. So this is a little bit tricky because I don't have my patches written out, so it's a little bit of a guess. I thought it was somewhere here. I don't see it. I guess we're just going to have to YOLO it. Easier. I should have totally planned this out and have like all the effects or all the patches written down, but hey, there's some fun to be had in just winging it. This is one of the big ones, the Echo Boy, which does exactly what you would expect. It's an echo, it's a delay unit. With some tricks up its sleeve, so there's a lot of different delay models. I think there's also a space delay, yeah, space echo. The funny part is you can actually there's some tape saturation style effects with it as well, and you can actually really going ham with the saw now, so I hope that's not too annoying. Use this diffusion. You can actually bring it into sort of like a reverb kind of sound. So let me just overshot it. There we go. This is our default patch. We can strip the reverb from the D-50 off. So let's try. And you can actually add some wobbles to it. Make it a bit larger. And so this way, even though strictly speaking there is no reverb unit in this EffectRack, which is actually a good thing to say, there is no reverb unit in here. For the time being, of course, this will likely be expanded. But you can still get some really cool reverb sounds out of the Echo Boy, which makes it very usable and very multi-purpose. And again, all these separate units also have their own presets. So you have presets for every single module in your rack. You also have presets for the entire rack. So that's Echo Boy, really cool. Here's the Echo Boy Junior, which is essentially the slimmed down version of the Echo Boy with some different settings. But it mostly does the same thing, although you can't expand it and get more controls like the Echo Boy. So I would definitely stick with the Echo Boy. Filter Freak, and the Filter Freak, the bigger version. So this is a single Filter Freak. Now we should be able to get this to modulate as well, I think. Although it doesn't seem... there we go. So this is basically a filter automation tool. The Filter Freak 2 gives you 2 bands for even more modulation madness, and they probably have some interesting things in here. Let's do something rhythmic. That's always fun. So yeah, this is definitely a cool thing is you have these step sequences in here as well. That's actually how they do this. You have the filter step through the sequence. So it's definitely a very deep and interesting way to do it. It somewhat reminds me of what the cable guys did with the filter, the shaper box is the word I'm looking for, the filter shaper. This is a little less intuitive, but it is more of an old school approach, which is actually the thing with all these boxes. They are all pretty modeled to look and work like a analog unit would, which is sort of the thing they are going for. So that's good. MICROSHIFT. So usually this is used on sounds which are more centered with less width to add width to the sound, which makes me wonder. The downside being that most of the sounds of the D-50 are actually pretty wide, so I don't think I actually have so the general concept, as far as I know, is that they use a small delay with a small bit of detune, which is offset to the left and right channels to add some stereo width to your sounds, but best to be demonstrated on vocals perhaps. Not something I have at hand right now, so let's just move on. Pattern Man. Let's get back to the strings because they work well. So this is basically a pen effect. Once again, I'm somewhat reminded of what the cable guys did with the shaper box. There you can just draw in the curve of your pen. Here you have these controls for the offset width and the smoothing. Smoothing is actually pretty cool. You can make like a Knight Rider kind of thing. It's a bit fast for Knight Rider, but you get the idea, right? It is perfect, but it looks a little bit like it. Definitely very useful to have effects pan from left to right and give a little bit of motion. Now, usually I would not put it this wide, so maybe just put slightly something around here. You actually would like to beat sync this, which is something I haven't found out yet. I think you can beat sync these effects. So that adds just a little bit of that motion to the sound, which is really cool. Face. Makes things go flangy. Which is actually a really cool effect to add to, once again, strings works pretty good. Strings and pads work really well for these sort of slower effects because you can get the full modulation in there, but they also have some presets for other things. Just interested to see what they have. Let's just do a cool reso. If you want to make alien sounds, they've got you covered. Oh. That's a nice addition. So that's the Phase Mistress. It does all sort of weird phase shifting stuff. Primal tab. Let's dive back into our little Fantasia patch. Because Fantasia is pretty nice because you have both the bell for your short attack, and when you hold the notes you get the strings. So you can sort of demonstrate both at the same time. Which is really cool. And let's see, they also had some super long delay, so there we go. Goes on for a while. Well, we have time, so let's go. Okay, still going. This is made for hands-free playing. Let me just grab some coffee or something. Well, they weren't lying. So there's a little bit of a pitch thing going on. Very creative effect. That's just... Oh. There we go, radiator. No, this isn't one of my favorites. It's a sort of saturation plugin. It also tends to be... There's a lot of noise in it, which is probably intentional to emulate something. I try to keep noise out of things. So it's interesting when people use plugins to put noise into things. That's a lot more gain. Can we actually gain compensate this? We can, but if we do... we actually lose so much of the signal, it's not as saturating anymore. But I bet this can be a very useful effect. A lot of people are really positive about the radiator, saying it's really like the warm analog thing. Yeah, sure. I don't really care that much about it. Like, yeah, here's the guy playing the D-50 saying he doesn't care much about the old stuff. It's a bit weird, I know. But, I don't know. This is basically an EQ unit. Always good to have in a sort of rack setup to filter out or lower some things in your chain. So if your chain is getting really high on high notes, you can just pop in an EQ into the chain, turn it down a little bit, make sure it doesn't overdrive in a later stage. Definitely handy to have, but yeah, it's pretty basic. Actually, low, mid, high, and a drive control. Nothing too fancy, but very useful to have. And last but not least, the tremolator. Well, that doesn't need a whole lot of explanation, I guess, but I'm interested to see So it has some, yeah, again, it has one of those draw-in sequencers, so that's cool. So you can definitely do some weird stuff if you want to. So this is set to custom, which intrigues me. Okay, actually, interesting. So that's sort of your swing. Yeah. Okay, that's cool for some rhythmic effects, so especially if you dial it down a little bit, so you still get some of the sound underneath it. That's pretty cool. Actually, I should have somewhere in here. Actually, I think it was bank 5. Where I ran into some maybe not. So this is why you should make a list of your patches, because it makes it a lot easier to find things back. Oh, dreams. Oh, that's an interesting little tail there. Let's do that without, actually. It's really sad. That's cool. So even when just randomly messing around with these effects, you can get some good results, which is actually something you read a lot about on the reviews. A lot of people praise Soundtoys for making plugins that are really so easy to get to sound good, which I must agree is pretty true, because when I first loaded in this plugin, I wasn't all that enthusiastic about it, because it's basically sort of a multi-effects plugin, but with sort of an old school layout and old school knobs and stuff. And it wasn't instantly love or something. It was like, okay, that's fine. But the more you play with it and experiment with it, it actually starts to grow on me that it is true that a lot of this stuff just instantly sounds good. So, like, for instance, this patch that I had in the beginning, this distorted fuzz patch, this actually it just sort of started to exist by just randomly dragging modules into the effect unit and just seeing what would happen. And that's a really good sign when you're playing with effects and things just click and work out. That's usually the sign of a good effects unit, is that it inspires you and it makes you think, oh, well, that's cool. And also something that's pretty interesting to know if you're like, oh, I don't want this entire thing every time I want an effect. I need to use this entire thing. But I think the individual modules are too expensive. Just as a demonstration, using Reaper, of course. So it might differ from DAW to DAW, but basically it's just like you add rack, double click it, and I have to duck really weird, put it to small, whatever, throw it on, and you can click this little button with the show gear. It hides the side, so now it's just basically your separate individual little thing. So it's not that daunting to work with, really. So yes, it is 3 or 4 clicks more, of course, than you would normally have if it's just a separate unit. You would just click effects and add it and you're done. Now you have to put it to small. It would actually be nice if you could like store that as a setting. So there's an idea for your Soundtoys. Make a setting so you can actually start it up in small mode. Very simple, should be doable. If you make that happen, I bet a lot of people will go, oh, that's amazing. I want that. So yeah. And just as a last little thing, just as a little bit of a demonstration, let's just do something and see what happens. Now you may have noticed I'm a really big fan of these big patches, these large pad sounds. It's just my jam, and the D-50 does it really well, actually. So let's not make it any harder than it should be. Let's just stick to presets, but let's just put some stuff together. So this sound, for instance, could use a little bit of a delay, maybe, just to add a little bit of motion. Just okay, that's pretty. Let's throw in the crystallizer. So you can click the buttons and mouse wheel. That's how you, most of the time, sometimes you need to move it a little bit before it grabs. Most of the time, that's how you can just one hand cross. So see, it lost focus again. So that might be a Reaper thing. That might be a thing of the plugin. I don't know. There we go. I definitely want just a little bit less of a modulation in here. So where do I do that? That's nice and smooth. Now let's take out a little bit of the highs, because I'm going to add some back in with the it's a little bit harsh, maybe. Actually, let's just. So this is really quickly, just going with random stuff, and it works out really quickly. So that's definitely a big upside of this EffectRack. So video's running along again, so this is probably a good point to say, let's just keep it at this for now. Next time I will be back with the EffectRack, because I am planning to do another run at this again with the trusty D-50, because I like it a lot. I'll get in some basic beats, and I'll prepare a few patches so we can just sort of hear the sort of movements you can get out of this, because this is just scraping the surface, because there's a lot to go through. And then I also want to, because this is essentially, it's not a cheap option, of course, and it's meant to give you a full suite of effects. So I do plan on actually pitting it against something. And that's actually one of my favorite multi-effects units, just to give you a little bit of a vibe. Yeah, that's Unfiltered Audio's biome. Actually, I'm not running the correct version right now. But basically, this is also a multi-effects unit. It's sort of a rack unit as well. But it has a very, very different approach. And I just want to show some pros and cons of both versus each other. Because price-wise, right now, they are pretty much in the same price league. So that's it for now. I'll just cut it off here. Have a great day and see you around.